All right, good morning, good afternoon. Glad to see y'all here for our workshop on classroom management. You have to excuse me, a little whole family's got some type of cold here in the middle of end of July. How you get colds in July, I don't know, but whole family. If you got kids, you know how it goes. Starts with one of the littles, and then kind of spreads from there all over the place. So yeah, we're just a whole family of stuffy, sniffly, sore throats, all sorts of fun stuff. Um, but I'm excited to be here and excited to share with y'all just kind of my take on classroom management, which is a little different. If you've been on a couple of these workshops before, the way I look at things tends to be a little bit different than what is the norm or the accepted. And so I want to try to take my stab at classroom management in a similar fashion. So with that, let's get looking at classroom management. So, like I said, I'm Jeff Anderton. I'm the owner and founder of Teaching High School Chem. I grew up in the suburbs of Atlanta, Marietta, Georgia. I'm the middle of three boys. So I have an older brother and a younger brother. I grew up loving this time of year. This was the time of year where we left the house in the morning, went and played in the creek in the morning, and then we'd come home for lunch, and then and then we'd go out back out again in the afternoon. We wouldn't be home all day long. Ride our bikes to the pool, that kind of thing. Love growing up that way. I have a degree in chemical engineering from Georgia Tech. Decided that's not where my heart lay. So I ended up going back to school to get a second bachelor's in secondary science education. And teaching for my passion is. And once again, if you are a teacher and you really feel called to it, it's almost less of what you do and more of who you are. I haven't been actively in a classroom for the last year, but it's part of my DNA, and that's part of why I want to teach you. I want to teach y'all because that's part of who I am. I love teaching my kids. I love teaching people around me. That's just my natural way of doing things, and hopefully it's yours as well. I started teaching chemistry in 2001. I was tutoring it before then. So I've been doing chemistry in some way, shape, or form since like 1990, I think it is, when I was a sophomore in high school. And so it's been a long time that I've been about doing chemistry. So today we're looking at classroom management, and just first couple things for the basics. First and foremost, anything I talk about in classroom management is incredibly situationally dependent, that you are limited by or empowered by your administration and your parents and your school culture. The last school I was at, I was part of the middle school, and I taught sixth grade science for a couple of years, which I really, really enjoyed. I enjoyed teaching them some basics of chemistry and giving them that science foundation they needed. In this middle school, we were really good at like keeping the rules, and our kids did what they were supposed to do. The high school had a culture of kind of like nobody cares, and it drove me batty. And so those kids could get away with a lot of things, and it's like I would have had a really hard time teaching in that high school because of that culture. And because of the way the administrators just kind of let things slide, that would have really been hard for me. But so what you can do and how you're able to manage your classroom and how you're able to, get your kids, motivated varies a lot by your administrative support and by your parents as well, and kind of how they're going to respond. I'm a firm believer, by the time you're teaching chemistry, it's my hope that parents are minimally involved, and it's primarily between me and the student. And so that's kind of my approach to classroom management, that it's less about me and the parent and more about me and the student. They're 16, 17, 18 years old, and so they should be able to, they're wanting to start act like young adults. They want to be treated like adults. And so I start kind of holding them to a higher standard. And I want it between me and them. And so that's part of it. But it all kind of comes into what is your school culture. All right. Some other basics. You got to have an environment of learning. For me, this doesn't look like it. He's sitting at the desk. He's kind of got this confused look on his face. This kid's on a phone by the look of it. You got to have it where you have an environment of learning, that every day is a school day. My kids would always complain, it's like, Mr. Anderson, it's the day before Thanksgiving break. I'm like, I know, you have a quiz today. And they're like, what? I'm like, well, I mean, they knew it was coming, but still, they would be upset that I would be giving a quiz the last day before Thanksgiving break. I'm like, guys, you're at school. Excuse the loud kids in the background. You're at school, and it is therefore a school day. So you need to focus and do that because it's a school day. I'm not that huge fan of some teachers like going out on the pretty days, and I'll do that occasionally, but not when the kids beg me to do it. It'll be of my time and choosing. And that's part of also creating environment of learning is I'm the one in control. I decide when quizzes and tests are. I decide if we're going to go outside and enjoy the pretty day. I decide these things. And that's part of instilling that culture. And, I am always one to listen and take my kids' feedback. And we'll definitely get a lot into that in a couple of weeks when we talk about dealing with teenagers. But I think teenagers respond really well when you listen and are willing to adjust if you have an adult-like conversation with them. And if they can give a good argument for something. Like if I've got a test scheduled for Thursday and they tell me on Monday, like, hey, Mr. Anderson, we got 3 other tests on that day. And I'll be like, all right, well, let me talk to those other teachers, and we can kind of figure something out. But it depends how they bring it to me. If they bring it all whiny, then I may not move. But it just kind of depends. And so I'll listen to them and I'll adjust, but I'm still the one in charge. And part of that also is I'm prepped every day. I need to know what I'm doing every day. Because when I'm not prepared, I don't come across as in control. I don't come across as the authority in the room, and the kids will smell that and they'll jump on it, and it's just going to be a long, hard day. No, but we all have those days. Now, I'm not saying I'm perfect. We all have those days where it's just like, oh my gosh, I have no clue what I'm doing today. And there have been days where I've had conversations about current science topics or current news or whatever's just bothering the kids, and we had a conversation for the whole period. And they're like, oh, we got Mr. Anderson off task all period. I'm like, yeah, because I let you. Because I wasn't prepared, and I kind of let it be a conversation about, the latest space rocket or the mission to Mars, or, we have some other side conversation. And I usually try to keep it on science. I try to keep it on topic. But, I've done that when I'm not prepared. Because I find it better to have kind of a stimulating back and forth conversation about a random science topic than to try to do a lesson I'm not prepared for, because that's just not going to go well. But in general, you want to be prepped. I'm also a big fan of, he's sitting down. I like to stand, because once again, that exudes a presence of I'm prepared. And your take on dress down days can be your take on dress down days. My take on dress down days is I don't like them. I found, and it's less about how the students dress and it's more about how I'm dressed. I found that when I'm dressed professionally, I get more respect from the kids somehow. I actually learned this when I was working at Chick-fil-A in college. That when I had to, when I was a supervisor and I had my tie on that said I was a supervisor, customers treated me one way. And then if I was just dressed like a normal crew member in a normal, college shirt, even though my name tag still said supervisor, customers would treat me with less respect and basically treat me like I didn't have a high school education, and it all depends on how I was dressed. And I've seen that in the classroom too. And so that's part of it. I felt that the way that I was dressed also communicated something to my students that they could pick up kind of non-verbally. All right. One of my big techniques, you'll see it in some of the other workshops, is that I like to use class time for kids to practice and to work. And I got to train them to be on task. That when I give them classwork or homework to work during class time, they need to know that that means being on task. And that just takes training and working with them. All right. You also need to create a safe environment. Classroom management, the 2 enemies of classroom management, well, really 3 enemies of classroom management. It's too hard, you're going too fast. It's boring, or some type of anxiety. And so to me, the safety thing's about anxiety. That if you have too many rules, then kids don't feel safe to struggle, and they get anxious if they don't know the answer, and they get all antsy and just not comfortable, and they feel like they got to do it, and they got to do it exactly the right way, and they get all, and they just get all tight, and that's never been my problem. My problem's always been the second one. I tend to be a little bit too loose at times. In my stint as an administrator, this is one area where I really had to grow. Is that I was one of those ones who like, hey, I believe you're professional teachers, go do your job, but they needed more guidelines from me than that because they felt anxiety because they didn't have enough certainty of what I was asking them to do. And same thing with kids, that they need to have certainty about what I'm asking them to do, what they're doing right now, how I want them to do it. And if we're too loose and if we're too comfortable in our classroom management, it can be very difficult for them because kids, they won't say this out loud, but kids actually want structure. There's safety in structure. A therapeutic term for it would be boundaries. It's kind of like a rancher puts a fence around his sheep, not to keep them contained, but to protect them from the wild, crazy things out beyond the fence. And so it's kind of the same thing with our kids. That if we don't have enough rules, it's like they don't have safety and they feel it. And so we have to somehow balance that out. All right. To me, I kind of break up classroom management into two different areas. What are non-behavior issues, and then what are behavior issues? So non-behavior issues would be things to me that are distractions that usually come from outside the classroom. So this can be things like school things, pep rallies, assemblies, sports dismissals. Okay, these are all distractions that can affect your day. Oh, you got pep rally that day, classes are shorter, or you got some type of special assembly, or you got standardized testing, and all the class periods are a little wonky and a little bit shorter, and the kids are like, hey, free day, and you're like, no, school day. You got to and how we approach that. Teaching in a high school, you're going to have kids missing your afternoon classes because of sports dismissals. They're leaving early for this basketball game or for this football game, that kind of thing. It just happens. Other things that can happen, they can have a big test in another class the next period or later that day. They got the big US history test coming up and they're all freaking out. And that's a distraction in your classroom. Or they just got their grades back from that US history test and they're all upset and they're mad at the teacher and all those things. And that's a distraction in your classroom. Or they're just having, there are things that can happen within a grade or within a group of students that's because of something happening outside of class. Or it could be something happening with world events. I mean, my first year teaching was 9/11. So I'm in like my third or fourth week of teaching when 9/11 happened. And just having to respond to that, that was a major distraction in the classroom. And so it needed to be dealt with in some way, shape, or form. And so here's my big thing. For these latter two, let me address these two first. It's this one. You got to address the elephant in the room. I had an administrator at that school where we were doing 9/11, and this was a small private boarding school in Atlanta, so we had kids from the DC area. We had, one of my kids, his older brother was working in DC and was on a bridge and watched the plane hit the Pentagon. But we had Arab students. We had several kids from Saudi Arabia um, in our school. One whose name was Osama and another whose name was Hussein. That had to be dealt with. We had to approach that in some way. But you got to deal with the elephant in the room. Like for me, I use these a lot to my advantage. So like if they got a big test in another class, the way I usually deal with that one is like, because I'll hear them talking about it before class starts. And as well as I do that if I don't say anything about it, there's going to be a US history book sliding out over here. There's going to be some notes being looked at over here. They're going to be looking at some note cards over here. Anything they can to study for that test instead of listening to me. And so the way I usually approach it is I'm like, all right, guys, I know you got this big test next period. Here's the deal. If I see anything related to that test, instead of chemistry, it's mine till the end of the period. Second, if you stay focused and get done what you need to get done, any extra time we have at the end of the period is yours. And you can use it to study for that test. And it'll end up being my best lesson of the year because those kids are focused because if somebody starts talking or getting off topic, they will like, shh, stop, we got to have time to study for this test. And they'll keep each other managed. And it's amazing. I'll have a really great class and they'll really stay focused because they're motivated to stay focused because they want that extra 5-10 minutes at the end of the period to study for their test. If they're really upset about a test, if they come in and they're mad about how somebody graded something, I usually take this as a teachable moment because I'm a big believer in educating the whole child. That I'm not just there to teach them about chemistry, I'm also teaching them how to relate to authority. And so I'll be like, hey, did you talk to the teacher about how they graded it? I'm like, yeah. And they just shut me down. I'm like, whoa, okay, run me through the conversation. What did you say? And usually it's some type of verbal attack at the teacher. And they're like, and then they tell me what the teacher said. I'm like, all right, do you see how what you said, you were calling the teacher stupid or you were questioning the teacher's authority, you were doing something like that? And do you see how that would make the teacher defensive? And usually they're going to be like, yeah. I'm like, all right. So what would be a better way of doing that? What would be a better way of saying something? They're like, I'm not sure. I'm like, well, how about saying, Mr. Brown, would you be willing to explain how you graded number 5? Do you think that would come across better? Yeah. All right. So, and would it be better to have that conversation with Mr. Brown one-on-one or in front of the whole class? They're like, probably one-on-one. I'm like, exactly. All right. So how about in between classes, you go back to Mr. Brown, apologize for how you treated him the first time, and then ask him this new way. So I'm trying to coach them and teach them on how to do these things. And if that takes 5-10 minutes of class, at least I have them focused for the rest of class. I'd rather take 5-10 minutes to address the elephant in the room than to have to deal with it later. I also want to add a small caveat here is sometimes there are distractions that are worth losing a class period over. I still remember this was my third year teaching in Mississippi, so that makes it about halfway through my teaching career. And we had a student who had been at our school the year before, but she wasn't there that year. Her father had been killed in a car accident the night before. And my chemistry class came up to me, and I think we were supposed to have a review for a test or something. We may even had supposed to have a test. I don't remember what we were supposed to do. I just remember it being a pretty significant lesson. And they came to me and said, hey, Mr. Anderton, can we go be with Mia? And to me, it was a no-brainer. I mean, I had to run it by my administrator, but I was kind of like, y'all, this was a small private Christian school. This was a class of 18. And they're all really close friends with her. And it's like, y'all don't need to be here. You need to be with her. And I'm okay losing my class time for you to go be with her. And they did, or 9/11. I lost pretty much all my class periods that day. That's okay. If you have a tragedy, you have something big come up, there are days where it's okay to lose teaching class to minister to the hearts of your kids. Now, these other things, pep rallies, assemblies, sports dismissals, and those things, I'm all about these other two. Make a plan for those. Make a plan for what you're going to do for your kids when you should know a couple of days in advance that, hey, the classes are going to be shorter. Make a plan and tell the kids, like, hey, tomorrow we have a pep rally, the classes are shorter. Here's how we're going to handle it. And you get them on the same page with you ahead of time. That way, when you get there, you're not wasting half of a shortened period trying to argue with them as what you're going to do. They should be on the same page. They may gripe a little bit, but then you make them do it. And then you make that plan beforehand. Same thing with sports dismissals. Like, hey guys, I know some of you are going to be missing on Friday afternoon because of the football game. All right, we have a quiz scheduled for Friday. I expect all of you who are leaving for the football game to take that quiz before you leave, okay? Or it's going to be considered late. Something like that. Like you're setting the standard. Like, hey, I know some of y'all are going to be going to that football game. You need to turn in this homework before you leave. You're setting some type of expectation, and then you're holding them to it. And I generally tend to try to set my expectations so that they work for me. I'm putting they're 16, 17, 18. I'm putting the ball more and more in their court. Hey, you need to come in and take this quiz. You need to get this homework for me. I'm not going to go around the period before they're leaving trying to track down every kid during my prep period to figure out who hasn't taken that quiz or not. That's not happening. It's on them. And so I start putting more and more on them as they get older. All right, so that's non-behavior. Behavior. The interesting thing about behavior issues that I've learned over my teaching career, and I'm going to kind of just give you my story on this, is I'm generally always, for most of my teaching career, I was that teacher who I wanted my kids to like me. That's part of just my personality. I'm that people pleasing person. Um, I wanted my kids to like me. I wanted to be kind of like their favorite teacher. But I also was always the one. I mean, I held a rigorous standard. I wasn't going to water it down just because I wanted to be liked. But I always had that in terms of behavior. And a lot of times when I would confront kids, I would feel bad that I had to confront them. I would feel like I was being mean. I would feel like I was being the bad teacher, or I would feel like I let them down somehow, and I would just beat myself up. Or we have those students who just push our buttons in ways that nobody else has ever been able to push our buttons. You have those students who you will never name your kids the same name as that child, and you know that, and and so I have those, and so I'm learning that I'm getting triggered, and I'm getting upset, and I'm getting fearful, and I'm realizing that a lot of what's going on with behavior issues is not only about what that kid's doing, but about what's going on inside of me. How are they affecting me, and how am I being affected? Like, am I having a bad day that day, and therefore I'm blowing up when I shouldn't be blowing up? Am I, I don't know if you've ever done this one. I've done this one where I've been teaching on the board and I hear somebody talking behind me, and I just turn to that troublemaker and I chew them out, only to realize 2 minutes later there was another kid that was talking and not that one. I've had that happen. Kind of our presuppositions, our biases. We have the talkers in our classroom, and we assume they're the ones doing the talking, and we can allow those biases to affect things. So for me, classroom management was always difficult for me for a long part of my teaching career, and then I finally kind of had two big shifts. The first shift was, I think I always felt like it was between me and the kid who was misbehaving. And it was always about me versus them. And I thought I was always being bad to punish that kid or be mean to that kid. And what shifted for me was this first one, that I realized that my purpose as a teacher wasn't to punish that one kid. My purpose as a teacher was to protect the other kids in the room and their ability to learn. Because you can think that like the person who pulls out their cell phone at a movie and starts texting with the screen full on bright, you may think that it's just between them and like whoever's next to them, but it's like affecting the whole theater. And so for somebody to say something is actually protecting the whole theater in a sense. And so it's the same way. I need to protect the other 18, 20, 30 kids in the room, whatever the number may be, so that they can learn. And if this one kid is keeping everybody from learning, then it's my job to protect the other kids and do something about it. And then the other thing is their behavior is not about me. It's so easy for me to have a kid who's talking and I'm like, oh, he's being so disrespectful to me. And I'm just like getting all amped up and mad because he's not respecting me. And it's like, it's not about me. He's got crap going on at home. He's got this going on with his girlfriend. He's got this going on at work. And, or he's just confused or whatever. And I need to deal with the kid where he's at. And that was a big shift for me. So my responsibility Um, and I believe our responsibility as teachers is we got to manage our emotions, we got to manage the classroom environment, and I can manage how I treat my students. And I'll deal with that a lot when I talk about teens. But if you're treating a kid with respect, you're more likely to get respect back. I've heard so many teachers say, no, those kids should give me respect first because I'm the authority. I'm like, you're also the adult. Why don't you model what you want from them? Treat them with respect first, and then you're going to be much more likely to get that respect back. That's been my experience. Um, is that if I treat my kids in a disrespectful way, I'm going to get disrespect back. But if I treat them respectfully, I'm going to get respect back. Kind of works that way. Good old golden rule. Treat others how you want to be treated. So let's look at how to respond. So to me, you kind of got two camps. You can go towards what I call judgment, where you say, that's bad, that's wrong, you get a detention. End of conversation. You have no further conversations with that kid, but that's it. You judged it. It was wrong. Here's the punishment. Versus curiosity, which you're gonna kind of see what I mean by that as we go along. Curiosity is more looking at trying to understand what's going on with that child's heart and what's going on with that child in general, and then you take actions accordingly there. Um, like sometimes what one kid does to get to detention may be for another kid may be a different punishment because of what's going on. All right. So to me, judgment seeks to be in control, that it's all about me as a teacher being in control, and I must exert, my authority. They can't disrespect me. I can't let them see me be weak. I've got to I've got to have an iron fist. And judgment, on the other hand, really seeks to understand the child. Curiosity, sorry. Curiosity, on the other hand, seeks to understand the child. Like, what's going on? Why is this child doing this? Is this normal for this child? Now, a lot of these things are things that are going on in your head as you're trying to respond. Um, and the way this looks is, I hear this one all the time. They should know better. And my normal response, whenever I hear a teacher or a colleague, somebody say they should know better, and my normal response is, why? Have you taught them to know better? Have you taught them what they need to know? If not, make a teachable moment. For example, a good example for me would be I tend to be sarcastic. Not tend to be, I am sarcastic with my students. And when I'm dealing with 15, 16-year-olds, they're not always really super crystal clear on where the line is coming back the other way. And so, like, I'll have a kid, like, we're doing some sarcastic banter back and forth, and then all of a sudden he says something that's just like, ooh, that went beyond sarcasm to disrespect. And the first time that happens, my response is like, whoa, whoa, stop. That was too far. So my first response is I make a teachable moment. And I'm like, hey, buddy, do you see how that was a little bit too far? Do you see how that was too much? Do you see how that was too sarcastic and too biting and too disrespectful? And they're like, yeah, I do. Okay. Then after I've taught them, if they do it again, then, we enter back into this world. They should know better. They've been taught. Now we need to worry about consequences. All right. Instead of asking a kid, why did you do that? Try to invite them to help you understand. That's actually really helps. You invite them to share. And I have this written down later in the slide, but this is not one of the things you have a conversation in front of the whole class about. If you need to pull a kid in the hall or wait till the end of the period and have this conversation with them, hey, can you help me understand what just happened there? Why did you throw that at Susie? Why did you take Billy's paper? Why did you draw on Jimmy's book? Whatever the situation may be in your classroom, you can ask them to help me understand. Like, can you help me understand what's going on? Okay, because what's going on there is instead of making that child defensive, you're trying to draw them out. And you're trying to help, and you're trying to show them that you're on their side, which is a huge thing for me. Okay. I think judgment sees it as a power struggle between you and the student. Curiosity invites parents, administrators, counselors, other teachers, other parents. For example, I've had situations where it's like, hey, I've been having problems with Susie. And I can talk to other teachers about it, and they're like, hey, have you tried this? Or hey, call mom, or you call dad. Like they'll tell you like which parent to talk to. And you can learn from other parents, you can learn from other teachers, counselors, that kind of thing. I find that this is the big one to me. If you ever want a teenager to act like a child, treat them like one. Oh, and they will act like a child. I have two general rules for working with teens. That I will treat you like an adult until your actions deem otherwise. And then I will not hold you to the standards of an adult because you're still a teenager. So I will treat them like an adult, but I don't expect them to always act like an adult. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to cross the line on sarcasm. They're going to do silly things because that's what teenagers do. But if I treat them with respect and like an adult, and I understand that they're going to make mistakes, then that actually helps me approach them in a lot gentler way that they're going to be more responsive to. Here's kind of where I see the big distinction. The judgment mindset has this mindset of if I win their obedience, then I win their minds. If they're obedient to me, then they're in class and they're engaged. And really, I would say this is the summation of my teaching philosophy. If I win their hearts, I win their minds. If a kid knows I'm on their side, if a kid knows I'm there for them, if a kid knows that I'm curious about understanding what's going on with them and why they're disturbing my class, then I'm going to win their attention better. And I'm going to win their minds better. Now, this doesn't mean you don't give consequences. I'm all about consequences. But like I said earlier, this is a private conversation. It doesn't need to happen in front of the class. So I'm all about consequences because I think it's important. Because you got to, the way I do it, and I once again, I'm trying to do this in a way that's not power struggle, that's not me versus them. First thing I do is I give them a choice, not a threat. They're disrupting class by putting somebody down. So I say something like, hey, you can be part of the conversation without putting others down, or you can choose to leave the conversation and stand in the hall. And I'm putting all of it on the student. It's now their choice. It's not between them and me. It's between them and them. They get to choose. I've had this happen for a whole class. I had a class. The whole class was talkative. And I'm like, all right, guys, last warning. You can choose to be on task, and I will finish going through this lesson. Or you can look all this stuff up on your own and try to figure it out on your own. And I'm going to go sit down if you continue to choose to talk. And I had to actually happen back-to-back periods one day. It was just one of those days. And one class buttoned down and they stayed on task. They chose to stay on task, and I finished the lesson. The next period chose to talk. And I was like, all right, you chose. Because that's what comes next. You get the consequence that they chose. If they chose to do what do what it took to stay in the classroom or for me to stay teaching, then that's what happened. But in this case, this class kept on talking. I'm like, all right, guys, here's the rest of the terms and things you need to know. There's your book. Look them up, figure it out. We'll go over it tomorrow. I'm going to go have a seat. And now I understand that probably in maybe 50% of schools that wouldn't have flown. But I knew my administrator that I had, and I knew that I could get away with that, and so I did. Because I knew he would have backed me up, and he would have even understood why I did it. And so that's where some of these methods depend on what's going on. And I didn't have problems out of that class for the rest of the year because I gave them a choice, they chose, and I gave them a firm consequence. And I think consequences need to look different for different kids. There are some kids where having a detention is a big consequence. Like their parents are going to be, some kids a call home is all they need. Some kids a Sitting out in the hall for the rest of the period is all they need. Other kids, you're going to have to go to an administrator eventually. You got to make your paper trail. You got to say, hey, Jimmy did this on the last month, and then Jimmy did this last week, and so I'm sending him to you this time. And you've sent notification home to the parents, and they know it's coming. And so you document yourself there. But some kids need stronger punishments, and you're going to have to kind of go up the ladder eventually. But those should be rare. They should be very rare. Like once a year, maybe, kind of rare, if that. But so I'm all about giving consequences. I don't feel like this curiosity. I don't want you to get the idea that I'm just trying to coddle the child and make them feel better and not mess up in my classroom. That works for grade school, but we're talking high school. So high school, I'm still curious. I'm still wanting to know what's going on with them, but I'm going to give them consequences. Think about it. Like, if one of your coworkers was making a mess out of your day, like they were doing something that was making your life harder, one of your other teachers at school, if you approach them this way, how well do you think they would respond? They're going to be defensive. They're going to shut down. They're not going to want to listen to you. But, if you come at them with kind of this curiosity of like, hey, can you help me understand, what's going on with you going over your class period so the kids are coming to my class late? Can you help me understand what's going on there? And they're like, oh yeah, my clock's broken. I'm like, hey, can I help you get a new clock? Have you talked to so-and-so? Like, who knows what it could be? Like, but opening up a dialogue with another adult works a whole lot better when you approach it from a curiosity standpoint. So guess what? It works that way with teenagers. They're a lot more receptive when you approach them from this standpoint. Now, it's different than a conversation with an adult because you are an authority figure. And so at some point, there are boundaries where you give them a choice. This is the boundary. They get to choose, and then you give them the consequence. There can be the positive consequence of their choice, or it can be a negative consequence for their choice. But they choose. And then you give it to them because you're the authority figure, and you get to decide what the consequences are. I had an administrator who, he said this all the time, which made it annoying, but it's still true. He's like, you can choose your actions, but you cannot choose the consequences of your actions. And that's such a true statement. And so that's really kind of what these kids need to learn, because when it comes down to it, I heard this during a parenting seminar. It is safer for our kids to make bad choices and get consequences from us than they get consequences when they get older. It's better for them to learn that copying somebody's homework or cheating is bad, and get a punishment from us than it is to cheat on their IRS tax return and get a call from the IRS. I'm a lot safer of a person than the IRS. And it's better for them to get those consequences now. Like, for example, I had this they were great kids. They were good kids. And they had a dismissal for soccer, and they were supposed to dismiss at 1. And we had lunch right before that. They chose, without getting permission, without telling anybody in the office, without telling anybody in the school, to get in their car, leave campus, go get lunch, and then come back. And they're like, well, we were already kind of on our dismissal for our sports thing. I'm like, no, you weren't. You left campus without letting anybody know. And it's like I still gave them a consequence because I wanted them to learn that was not a proper thing to do. It was a small consequence, but it's still a consequence. And I explained to her parents of like, hey, this is why I'm still giving them a consequence, because I want them to learn now that just because you're good doesn't mean you get away with things later. That was unfortunately one of the lessons I learned growing up. Like I remember cheating on a test in 7th grade, but because I was a good kid, I got away with it, or I got a little hand slap. I wish I'd learned a more serious consequence. I didn't cheat again, but just in other areas of my life, I wish I had not learned this lesson that if I do enough good, it cancels out any bad I do. And it kind of gave me this transactional idea of how relationships work that I wish I didn't have, and that I had to work through. And so we're trying to prepare our kids for life after college. And so we're trying to teach them these things. All right. So for me, it's all about playing the long game. Because this whole idea of investigating what the kid's thinking and trying to figure out all that curiosity can feel like a lot to add, especially because you're not their parent. And it's not your job to parent these kids. But it is, like I said earlier, I firmly believe it's our job, and I know this for me, and I really think it's true, should be true for all teachers, that it's our job to teach the whole child. Not just academically, but we're also teaching them relationally, emotionally, spiritually, whatever other illy you want to add to that. So I'm trying to teach kids how to manage their emotions. I'm trying to teach kids how to relate to authority figures. I'm trying to teach kids how to relate to their peers that they're mad at in lab group, when they can't work with their lab partner. I'm trying to teach them how to do that. I'm trying to teach them those skills because, once again, my idea is I don't want them just to walk out of chemistry and be able to walk into a college chemistry class and be prepared. My goal is for them to be able to walk into life and be prepared. So I'm trying to teach the whole child. A lot of it is being mindful of what's going on in me. If I know I'm having a bad day, and we've all had those days, something's going on in life, the kids got you up in the middle of the night, you're sick, whatever the case may be, I've got to be mindful of what's going on inside of me and how that's affecting how I'm responding. Am I getting more upset than normal and need to kind of rein it in somehow? A lot of times, if I can keep myself centered, if I can keep myself kind of under control, know what's going on inside of me and handle my own emotions, then I tend to be a lot better at handling the kids' emotions, which once again also trickles out into every other area of life. That, when I'm interacting with my wife, it's helpful for me to know what's going on and if she's triggering me and if I'm getting more upset than I really should be because of, this thing that happened 10 years ago, then that's helpful because I can then work on that within me and then come back and interact with her in a much healthier way. Same thing with my kids. It all trickles out elsewhere. If you do this, if you really seek to win the child's heart and be curious about what's going on with them and what in them is driving the behavior, it's going to ripple out and improve everything else in your classroom. Because, like I said, some kids are just going to be disobedient and you're going to have to get an administrator involved, and there's not a whole lot you can do there. That does happen. But it's amazing how many times I've seen kids who are problem kids for other teachers, but because I treat them with respect, because I'm curious about what's going on with them, I still give them punishments, but they know that there's a reason behind it. And I'm not just being frivolous and giving them a consequence. I eventually win them over. And I end up not having nearly the behavior issues out of them that other teachers do. And so that's kind of what I drive for there. And this is going to give you a deeper relationship with your kids, but it's also going to save you time in the long run. Like I said, it's I've got to put in some time at the beginning of the year to understand my kids and understand what makes them tick and why they're doing what they're doing. But if I do that, if I put that time in, then I really feel like I gain that time back at the end because I'm not having those behavior issues into the year. No, because here's the deal. If you manage a good class all year long, that last stretch from spring break to the end of the year is manageable. Because my kids know every day until the last day of school is a school day. And I'm prepared, and I expect them to be prepared every day from spring break to the end of the school year. I have that expectation. I'm modeling it for them. I'm treating them with respect. I care about what's going on with them. I understand that it's, the last semester, the last quarter, even for my seniors. But I guarantee you, my experience has been my senioritis cases, while still annoying when I've had my seniors, is dramatically less than what other people deal with. My seniors don't shut down all the way. They know they can't. Because I'm still holding a standard. I'm still pushing, but they also know that I'm doing it on purpose. I'm doing it for a reason. I'm respectful of them, all those things. They know that. All right. So kind of road forward. We got the rest of the workshop series coming up. I really encourage you to next Saturday. So all the August ones will not be on Mondays. They will be on Saturdays. So this coming Saturday, August 3rd, I'm going to be looking at student engagement of how do you keep your kids engaged in class. And this will actually kind of be a preview of a new thing I'm offering, a course on student engagement, a little mini course. It'll be a short little thing, very inexpensive, just trying to help you with student engagement. And I'm going to kind of go through those things next week. And I think that's just a great workshop to be looking at. So like I said, those are all moving to Saturdays. The one on the 10th, like I've said, that's about for people who are teaching at private Christian schools. And then August 17th, that's probably one of my favorite workshops that I have, is just how to work with teens. I've hit on that a little bit today, but I'm going to really lay it out in a lot more detail in that workshop on the 17th, because I just really think there are ways that of working with teenagers that will make your teaching career so much easier in high school. And it comes down to three rules, three kind of general guidelines I have for guiding my interactions with teenagers, and it makes the world of difference. So, and then I have the crash course. If you are someone who you're still not 100% sure about the content of chemistry going into this year, this is what I recommend that you look into. It's me teaching through the entire year of chemistry. Every topic you need to know to teach chemistry, I go through and teach about. And there's a workbook where you can work through and practice those skills. There's a key that goes through and shows you, step by step how to do it if you get confused. And then I'll be emailing those people and checking in and making sure you're understanding what you need to understand. It is my goal for you to be really comfortable with the content going into the year. If you're comfortable with the chemistry content, but you're not always sure how to bridge the gap so that kids beyond, your best and brightest, you're always going to get it. But a lot of us end up with that kind of that double bell curve where we've got, our best and brightest get it, and then there's this gap, and then we got everybody else. The academy is all designed to close that gap and to make it so that our kids our B kids can move up to low A's, or in the A range, solid A range. That our C kids can move up to B range or higher, to close that gap and bring our kids up. And that's all about how we communicate it. This one's also all about saving you time. That I have an entire year's worth of handouts, labs, quizzes, review sheets, tests, all for you. And it's all designed to save you time. Because the less time you're spending on all of this, the more emotional space you have to be better at managing your classroom and better at teaching your class. When you're staying up to all hours of the night, either trying to learn the content or try to make a new handout or somehow make your book understandable, then I feel like that wastes time and energy that affects the rest of your class and also the rest of your life. I'm a firm believer in equipping teachers to be amazing chemistry teachers, but to also have a life outside of school. To be able to be with your kids, to be with your wife, etc. So I welcome any comments in the chat on classroom management or on anything that we're offering. And so I'll stay on another minute or so. If any of y'all have any questions, you can put that in the chat. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing y'all next week when we talk about student engagement.